Okay, so we are going to divide this segment into 4 sections. So first of all, for 10 minutes, I've got a fireside chat with Andre Naumann, who's the principal at Google Trust and Safety. Many of you will know Andre from this circuit, and also, of course, a co-founder of the GSE, both personally and on behalf of Google. So Andre and I will have a chat for about 10 minutes, then I'll hand over to Alice, who is our research and communications manager. She's going to talk a little bit about some research, a major research project that we are just beginning with the support of google.org. And then there will be 2 panels, one that considers the finance sector pilot that the GSE is currently initiating, and the last of the day, last but not least, we'll be reflecting on the need for cross-sector data sharing and why that's so important in the fight against scams and fraud. So, Andre, I'm going to sit here, not in a creepy way, but just to give us a bit of space. Andre, it's great to be on, to have this chat with you. Could you just give us a sense of why Google decided to embrace signal sharing, and also why the GSE, why did Google decide to be a co-founder of the Global Signal Exchange?
Sure. Can you hear me all? Hello? Yes, awesome. So, hi everyone, my name is Andre Naumann and I lead the Signal Exchange work on scams and fraud at Google Trust and Safety. Well, to your question, at some point when fighting scams and fraud, our teams started running into an interesting challenge, which Lori Flowers shared yesterday in detail when telling her story, how the scammer actually moved her across different platforms. What started with a message on LinkedIn, turned to a conversation on Gmail, and then WhatsApp, and then I think calls followed, and so on and so on. And from a platform's perspective, it's really difficult to understand the intent behind the interaction when you only see a slice of that journey. And it might even look innocent or benign. And when you try to review that interaction or a piece of content against your product policies, you might not necessarily find abuse or any violations, because you just don't have the full picture. And I think for us in Trust and Safety, there was a pivotal moment where we realized that, hold on a second, the only way to overcome this challenge is actually to share information with others, ideally globally, across sectors, because scammers do not respect geographical or sectoral borders. But the problem was there was no such thing. There was no platform available. And I think that's when we met you guys and Yori, and we quickly realized that we had the same vision. We had a very clear problem statement. And then for us, for Google, it was important to not only create a platform that will benefit us, but create something that could turn into a critical piece of infrastructure that would benefit many others.
Thank you very much. Now, we're about a year in. We actually we opened our doors in January 2025 with 40 million threat signals. Now we've grown to over 700 million and lots of partners. But if you reflect as a co-founder on the first year, what is sort of, and thinking back on your expectations of how it would go, what surprised you with, either how easy it was and how good it was, and what have been some unexpected challenges that we all maybe didn't anticipate? Yeah,
I'll probably highlight two very positive things and then one interesting learning or challenge. The first one, you already mentioned it, is that this phenomenal growth, going from us as like the first user, member, whatever, co-founder, to now having Meta, Microsoft, Amazon joining, GovTech, Singapore government, and other governments playing around with it, testing it. That has been an amazing journey so far. And the second thing is the speed of development, and it's a big shout out also to the engineering team of the GSE. The team fixing bugs, responding to feature requests, pushing out new versions. What the GSE is today is not what the GSE was a month ago, or even in the beginning of the year. So that has been a very it's just a very cool experience to work with you guys on this and kind of to see the GSE grow and develop. The one challenge or learning is when you create a global multi-stakeholder platform and invite many different sectors, you realize that everyone moves at different speeds and everyone is on their own journey. And I think for us, that was a huge critical learning this year, to acknowledge and to respect that journey and learn how to talk to different sectors, different countries, different organizations, and also help others on that journey, on their signal sharing journey.
That's right, isn't it? Because we all have our comfort zones. We all have areas that are easier or more difficult for us personally, but actually we're trying to do something that hasn't been done, and so that will involve everybody experiencing discomfort and experiencing how do we do things differently, and yeah, absolutely great point there. Could you just give us a bit of insight into how Google is using the Global Signal Exchange and what it enables Google as an organization to do that it couldn't do before?
We started with one product, Google Shopping. We have now connected or integrated 11 products in total, and a few other horizontal teams that work across multiple products. And every product and team, they kind of have their own use cases and approach, and we don't try to really, we try to steer and help wherever we can as the program team behind the Signal Exchange work, but we also give them space to test and try things. Some teams focus on takedowns. For some others, that's completely irrelevant. They want to use the data to train classifiers and models to actually prevent badness from reaching their products and services. Some other teams are, and I think Will mentioned it earlier, some other teams are using the data to improve or create better litigation cases. Help us to make better criminal referrals than to law enforcement as well. And we kind of see this as a let 1,000 flowers bloom. So let different teams and analysts experiment and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, and I guess that brings out an aspect of the Global Signal Exchange that may not be completely obvious. I think we've got very ingrained thinking about a kind of bilateral one-way notice and takedown. I gave you these signals. What did you do? Have you taken them down yet? And if you don't, that's a failure. But there's so many different types of actions or activities or learnings. And also signals may be strong or they may be weak. And I think this is something that Alice will return to in a minute. But if we just think about, finally, imagine that we're sitting here 2 or 3 years' time, everything's going great, and we're thinking about our objective, which is to reduce the cost of scams, both emotionally and financially, and also to try and shift the burden away from victims to look after themselves towards other stakeholders who are actually better equipped to shoulder that burden. So we're sitting here in 3 years' time, 2 years' time. How will we know when we're winning?
I think in Singapore, I gave you a very large number, 5 billion. That goal or objective has changed in the meantime. I think it would be great to have a large number of valuable, actionable signals on the platform. But more importantly, I think the way we see success, or the way we would measure success, is have signals flowing seamlessly in real time across sectors. Basically, the mission statement of the GCO, what the main objective, and then measure it by, let's say, the number of API integrations or daily signals exchanged, to really see, that there is activity that leads to impact and stories that we can tell. Second, what we really want to see is also driving down the TTL or TTR, time to live, time to resolution. So a signal that enters the GSE, and then how much time do we take to actually take action and resolve that incident. Seeing it drop from 20 hours to maybe 15, 10 hours, 5 hours, and then, moonshot would be minutes at some point, maybe not in 3 years, but just having that velocity within the system. And last but not least, I want to tie it back to the story that we heard yesterday, the victim story. We feel strongly about the GSE helping to change those user stories, to change the narrative. And hopefully in 3 years' time, we would have someone on stage who would say, hey, I received a message on LinkedIn, and then it went to Gmail, and that's it. Or it went to WhatsApp, and then it was caught. And that's where the story ends.
Yeah. And we were talking about this beforehand, and the victim stories from Laurie and others who've been courageous to stand up and share their experience, their terrible experiences. Those motivate all of us to do different things. Yeah, that wouldn't be such a great headline story, but we don't really want those victim headline stories. We want to protect victims and to disrupt and prevent scams in closer to real time.
And I hope that the GSE can be that force multiplier and helping platforms and the different sectors intervene at the right time when the victim is still a user and not a victim.
Yeah. Andre Naumann, thank you so much. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to our next speaker. So, Andre, thank you. And can I ask Alice Taylor, who is our Research and Communications Manager at Oxil Research. She's just going to give you some early indications and thoughts about a major research project that we are just beginning on with the support of google.org. So thank you. Alice, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Hello. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Thank you for all the nice thumbs up. Hi, everyone. My name's Alice. I'm from Oxil Research. So I'm a scam and fraud researcher, but I'm also the Deputy Safeguarding Lead at Oxil. My background before I decided to work in scams and fraud was as a speech and language therapist. So I have a healthcare background and I supported adults with learning disabilities and brain injuries. So what I'm going to talk today about is that Oxil is very proud to share that we have been funded by google.org, the philanthropic part of Google, to research scam victimization and how we can support victims by using a safeguarding approach. So when I came from my healthcare background into tech and discovered the GSE, I thought it's a perfect analogy to a safeguarding model. But what is safeguarding? So we're going to do a little exercise, okay? So I want you to imagine that you're the police, which for some of you will be quite easy because you are actually the police. We're going to look at some suspicions of child abuse. And I want you to think, with each suspicion, which of these pieces of information are useful? So, number one, a childminder observes cuts and scrapes on a child's hand. Useful, hands up, or not useful? Yeah, quite a lot of hands. A housing officer observes a child wearing a wig. Useful, not useful? Okay, a lot fewer hands that time. That's really interesting. A hospital doctor observes a very obedient child. What do you think? Okay, yeah, a few hands. And then the last one, a taxi driver observes a child unconscious with malnutrition and injuries. Yeah, okay. So it's a little bit of a trick question because they are all useful signs and they are all from a real case of child abuse. So this is Victoria Climbier, and her case was a landmark case in child abuse legislation in the UK. So she very sadly died in February of 2000. She was abused and actually murdered by her great aunt and her great aunt's boyfriend. Prior to her death, these were the suspicions of child abuse that were observed. This isn't even all of them. This is like half of them. And this is the range of professionals that saw her. They all observed these signs, these signals of abuse, but none of them were able to join the dots. So Victoria fell through the net and she died. And this led to a massive inquiry and a massive change of how we do safeguarding in the UK. And safeguarding is now all about information sharing. So before we talk a little bit more about safeguarding and about our research findings, we're going to do the exercise again, but we're going to think about scams and fraud. Now, I feel like I've kind of given the game away here, so let's just very quickly, is this useful information? The police receive a report of identity theft. Yeah, that's like everybody's hands. A registrar observes someone buying the domain name royalmail.com with a capital I that looks like an L. A GP observes a patient reporting depression and anxiety. So yeah, everyone. A phone company lose £2,000 in unpaid phone contracts. Yeah. So, trick question again. This time, the victim was me. In 2020, I had a scam message. It was a phishing message from royalmail.com telling me to pay a parcel fine. And then in 2023, I was denied an overdraft due to my bad credit history. And I was really surprised. Like, what bad credit history? I thought back not to the Royal Mail scam, but to some letters I'd received in 2022 from 5 different phone companies telling me that I owed them thousands of pounds of mobile phone credit, which was a big surprise. I thought that those letters were a scam because I had no idea why I was receiving them. I didn't really understand how I'd been victimised. And it was very frustrating because all the support that I tried to access after falling for this scam or becoming a victim of this scam was all about how not to fall for scams. It was all saying, use a password manager, protect yourself better. And I was thinking, you know, there's no support for when you have been scammed. There is only support for before. And I was thinking, how is a person supposed to avoid repeat victimization if they don't even know that they have been a victim or how they've been victimized? And it was only this year, in the summer of 2025, so that's 5 years after the scam occurred, that I was talking to my partner's uncle, and he said, I had that mobile phone credit scam, and in 2020 I got that Royal Mail parcel scam. And that was the first time that I could connect the dots between the outcome of the mobile phone credit and the cause, which was royalmail.com. So, we're now doing this piece of research, and when we started out with our, Google.org funding, we were thinking about susceptibility, and we were thinking about which groups are vulnerable to scams, and we wanted to identify them, think about what makes them so susceptible, and try and come up with solutions. And through our research, through my experiences, and through just looking at the literature, there is no consistent profile of a scam and fraud victim. And we are now moving away from the idea of susceptibility towards targeting. So instead of saying vulnerable groups who are susceptible to scams, we now say groups who are targeted by scammers. And just this little bit of language change is moving the onus away from victims and stopping thinking about people falling for scams and thinking of them as victims of crime. So with safeguarding, when I think of scams and fraud and then child abuse, right? Imagine if you tried to fix child abuse by training every child in Britain to be less susceptible to child abuse. That will never work. That's not how it works. And instead, safeguarding has moved the onus away from the child to somehow report their own experiences onto all the adults around them in their lives. So it's everybody's responsibility. So if we have a little look at some of our preliminary findings, this is, the groups that we are identifying in the GSE signals. You can see that enormous pink slice is general population, right? We're not seeing elderly people. They are way, way down that a little green segment. And what this data is showing us is that, firstly, there's no consistent profile of a scam victim, but there are situational vulnerabilities that increase the risk of victimization. Things like being financially aspirational. That's not an immutable characteristic about a person. That's something that any of us could be experiencing at any time in our lives. And things like sort of stress and being a small business owner are more significant risk factors. We're finding that people are being targeted more for these things than the elderly or people with disabilities. This is just a little example of our methodology of how we're actually doing this. So in the GSE, we've taken 200,000 signals. That was what that pie chart was based on. And we're using AI to sort of assign them relevance and confidence scores. So you can see, if we see, a scam that's got the word senior living in, that's targeting older adults. Whereas something like visas, immigration services, that's targeting people who are migrants or immigration-related situations. Something that I think is really interesting is that one for neurodiversity, neurospicyrecipes.store. That really jumped out to a lot of us because, from my speech therapy background, I've worked with a lot of neurodivergent people, and neurospicy is a term used by sort of the ADHD population, and it's a way of like depathologizing neurodiversity. It's a very in-group term that is really sort of personal, really specific, and not known by many people. So this is demonstrating to us how personalized these scams are and, how targeted these populations are by scammers. So the hope is that with our research project, we will generate findings like the ones that we've been coming up with. We'll have insights into how the population is being targeted. And then we'll move away from separate signals of a scam and fraud occurring towards joining the dots in a safeguarding approach where each of these entities are better able to share their suspicions with each other in order to protect victims. Thank you very much. I don't know who's next. It's the workshop next, isn't it? Or the panel. Yes, panel. Please come forward.
Thank you very much. I can't whisper away. I'm just going to move the mics away from me. I'd like to invite my panelist up, please, for the finance pilot panel. Thank you. We've got a crowd here. How much time have we got? 4:00 at the most. Okay, one sentence each. Yes, you are. Yes. Pardon me. I think we can get rid of this slide. Alice, I don't want to expose some personal identifiable information from your laptop. I never got to wear them at university, but these disco headphones. We could, but anyway, let's not. This session brings together an unprecedented coalition to tackle one of the most critical threats facing the digital economy, the industrialization of financial crime. Our panel today represents the essential components of a systemic defense. 9 leading financial and payment organizations, they're not in this panel, but they're represented by members of. 3 major law enforcement agencies, all the largest global tech platforms, well, I think missing one, and a unique niche threat intelligence provider by experts like the entertaining scam beta Kit Boga here. Really welcome to you, Kit, as well. This is not a traditional conference. This is an operational core of the Global Signal Exchange pilot. Our purpose is to move beyond theory and engage in deep research, exploring the viability of real-time signal intelligence, practical cross-sector workflows, and the creation of key accountability metrics, such as the crucial ratio of live versus disrupted threats, time to live of threats, and more. Some quick updates for you all about the pilot. The organisation, the Global Signal Exchange, was formally registered and launched in January 2025. This pilot was launched in September 2025. I think it's fair to say we're still at advanced stages of legal negotiations with several key stakeholders. That's been enormously challenging for everyone and continues to be. It's still a real block. Pardon me. We have to convince the lawyers. That's fair enough, but, it does take time. Various technical groups we've established to share intelligence, URLs, IP addresses, telephone numbers, bank accounts, but more critically, relational data, bundles of data. So you have, oh, bless you, thank you so much. Dry air conditioners, I'm not used to it, I'm in the UK, we just freeze. Yeah. So we've got high quality data feed providers to facilitate the design of a system generally that we can then scale. A research program, and you got a flavour of that from Alice. I don't know, she's disappeared, gone back to the stand, where we're looking at sector analysis, particularly for the finance sector, which sectors are being targeted or employed to help deliver scams and fraud. We know that the technical sectors and the e-commerce sectors are right up there because that's where it's all happening. It's scam infrastructure has been hosted on technical platforms and people are being scammed financially. So we know that those two are. Guess the number 3 that we're finding in these signals at the moment. You don't have to, but it's home delivery and logistics. So it's all the DHL, DPD. Alice got scammed by that. Royal Mail. We need to get 69p from you to sort of deliver some package. And you think it's nothing. 69p, I'll pay it because I want my parcel from Amazon to arrive. That's an identity theft. That's part of an identity theft. So, we've got this research happening because we've got this unprecedented amount of signal intelligence. We've got 3 public safety law enforcement. I'm really excited that we've got the Centre for Cybersecurity Belgium, we've got the National Crime Agency UK, and we've got GovTech Singapore. And they are all, and we can announce this week, sharing signals with the Global Signal Exchange. So in a way, we've got these very valuable inputs. We've got a banking community and payment provider community to make sense of that, to gain value from that, and then we've got outputs, which again comes back to police services and the rest of us. So this panel will offer first-hand insights into how these complex partnerships are being forged, what actionable intelligence looks like, from high-volume reports to niche, high-confidence data, and how we can collectively move from a reactive whack-a-mole approach to a systematic strategy that disrupts the scammer's business model at its source. And to kick off the conversation, let's please welcome Jen. I can't say much about you, Jen, because you work in intelligence services. I believe, we mustn't ask people to not photograph you, I believe, but yeah, it's all right, is it? Because you please do. Jen, could you, obviously we're really delighted to be able to announce that the UK National Crime Agency has started sharing data through the GSE. That's a huge hurdle for police services, and maybe you could talk more about the challenges of that and why. But generally, could you summarise the type of data and potential sources of intelligence that the NCA handles, focusing on the high-quality multimodal signals that you're able to share with the GSE pilot, particularly this finance pilot?
For sure. So can I just check everyone can hear? Yes, good. Thank you. Sorry, and just a correction, not intelligence services. That makes me sound like a spy.
Sorry.
And obviously I know a spy would say they're not a spy, but I'm not a spy. So I did go to the Spy Museum last night, though, by the way. That is excellent. If anyone wants to go to that, really good. So I actually work with the National Crime Agency, but also the City of London Police in the UK. Now, that's really important because what it does is it brings together a kind of national and also policing capabilities. The reason the City of London Police is really important is in the UK, all victim reporting for fraud or cybercrime basically goes into a function that we now call report fraud, and that has basically been updated and goes live today. It's a very soft launch, but essentially we'll do more campaigns around that. That goes to why it's really important. So one of the things that obviously everybody here knows that fraud and cybercrime is a massive challenge. What we are trying to do is do more work with industry where we can disrupt criminal activity at scale and really help to design out some of the crimes that we are seeing. So in order to do that, and this is really uncomfortable, and I know Emily said we've got to get uncomfortable, but law enforcement have to share more data. Because ultimately, otherwise we are holding information, and that is really difficult when it's about suspects. So let's just be clear, this is not about victim data, this is about suspect data. So where we know or suspect that criminal activity is occurring, how do we harness that wider partnership to have more of an impact? Now, one of the other things that we talk about lots of joint operational activity, and that is fantastic, and we need to do that, of course we do. But that's not always going to be something that we can do all day, every day, and have the biggest impact. So one of the other things that we're looking at is how do we share some of the, and we'll use the term signals, but I've realised that's a very techie term, and if I speak to banks, they don't like that term, and if I speak to the telco companies, they're like, well, what do you mean by that? And then I'm kind of going back and going, well, actually what I mean is, so a lot of the work that we've been doing is talking around what is useful information, and the pilot that we're doing with GSE and with different members is to literally say, what is the really useful bit of information that we can share that allows action to be taken. So this has to be there for prevention, detection of crime. That's our UK legislation that will allow us to share that information. But if we can share something early on, and that can be used to prevent crime, that's where we want to get to. So the sort of information that we're sharing is there will be a little bit that we're testing from where victims have reported some crime, but ultimately that is unlikely to go on to an investigation. It's a sure volume problem, or at least at that point, maybe we haven't made all the right connections to understand how that needs to be developed and how big that problem is. But we are also doing lots of work in a more proactive sense. So this is where we are trying to use our tools and things that only police and law enforcement can sometimes do. And we have lots of information where we suspect there might be crime going to occur. And we haven't confirmed it yet. But it might be because we might have an officer who is engaging online in an undercover kind of way. And they are looking at these different information signals, and they are pulling information from what they believe to be a criminal. Now we are looking at those because obviously we want to engage and find the criminals in the UK as well as overseas that are operating. But there'll be some stuff there that they're not able to act upon capacity, or maybe they're overseas, or maybe there's a different element they can't resolve down. So what happens if we share that information? Now the point of us doing that first is we know that we need to do more private to private, but also law enforcement need to play their bit. And I think earlier on, one of the opening things was, what more can we do? So the what more we're doing is testing how far we can go with this in a really safe, ethical, secure way, but making sure that we are harnessing that wider power of the signal.
And I think that's important for us to talk about, that the global signal exchange has what we call the open feed marketplace, where every accredited organisation can receive those signals from that more open marketplace. But these pilots, we're doing the financial sector pilot, is in a closed group, in a safe environment, and we can really choose who to share those signals with within that trusted group. We're still on inputs, and I'll come back to you, Jen. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to Kit because we're still on inputs. Kit, Great to be with you. I don't know if everybody here knows Kit, but he has an unbelievable YouTube channel with millions of followers, which is hugely entertaining, and it really helps us all to see these people who are successfully destroying our lives. Getting a bit of it back, but also you've automated a lot of that as well to sort of harvest data at scale, and I think that's hugely valuable threat intelligence. I'm going to keep bunging threat intelligence in there for Jen, but your unique value to the pilot is providing what we call very rich multimodal intelligence. So it's the linkage between bank accounts, which we're going to keep going on about, phone numbers, URLs, domain names. Can you share a recent example of your encounters that clearly demonstrate the breadth and high confidence data available from like just a single scammer interaction?
Sure. Yeah, thank you guys for having me. You can hear me. Cool. It's good to be here, and I think...
Can everyone see Kit? Can we?
Should I stand?
Yeah, maybe stand. Yeah, because I think you're a bit stuck behind this, and I don't want to start moving.
So I think. Thank you for the introduction. Super nice. For a little bit of context too. So a lot of what I do that may be a bit different is I really get in and investigate the scams. So I have a team, and I myself have done maybe 20,000 phone calls, like personally with scammers.
How long does a phone call take with a scammer, roughly?
Well, sometimes they're short because they get mad at me, so it could be 4 or 5 minutes. But other times it's hours and hours. And so
20,000.
Yes, and then I have a team that is doing this now, and then we've trained bots, like you mentioned, to do the same thing. And so I think the idea, talking about multimodal, I think it really, if I could steal. What Alice had up on screen of all these other touch points is, if a good example would be someone said, Kit, my dad was trying to buy a truck and they posted it on this website listed for sale, and the car didn't exist and he got scammed. And so that's a great piece of information. We have the URL, we have the domain, we have the phone number. That's great.
All as a bundle, really.
Yes.
So it's all together so you can see it related.
Yes. But if I take it a step further, this is where like the engaging with the scammer takes place, is that, well, now if I call the scammer and I say, I really want to buy that Ford F-150. Sorry.
No, you've got to. No, we need to hear it.
I
want grandma as well, who's got since the accident.
I do all these voices, and it's habit now, but I really want to buy this truck. And then what happens is they send me a DocuSign agreement, for example. It's an agreement that they made. And so we have this DocuSign URL, but we also have a business name, registered in the US where they're selling these cars from.
But surely you can just check that out and see that it's false.
No, usually they are using like victims or mules or people in the US to register that bank account, to register that business account. But then if one of the bots or the researchers says, well, I'm having trouble wiring the money to this account, then they send me another one. But this time, it's maybe not DocuSign, it's a Google Doc or something like that. And it has another business in the US. So, and now you can imagine with, like if you look at, if you imagine Alice's, this web that's expanding, that even that business name is now hosting 3 other websites that are also selling cars. And I hope this example is somewhat making sense. So even from the very beginning, when you have, this is a car scammer, if you kind of investigate it and you dispatch some bots and humans to fall for the scam, it just keeps expanding and you get more and more and more detail.
So if you think about the internet as a supply chain, a delivery system for the scammer, they're actually using a lot of kit out there. How are they doing that?
When you say kit, you don't mean me, Kit.
I do. No,
I got confused for a second. No,
they're using a lot of stuff.
I think that's like gives me some hope too. So I think what you're referring to is they had to use maybe some ad platform to advertise the car for sale, and then they had to buy the domain name, and then they had to host their website somewhere, and then they're using DocuSign or all these different things, all these touch points along the way. So I kind of see it like a timeline.
Yeah.
And through things like the global signal exchange and collaboration, there's all these little touch points along the way. I feel like I'm stealing everything Alice said, but the idea is like, take it way...
They're happy.
Oh.
No, don't worry. They're all tuned into what we're talking about as well, because they can.
If we can detect what's going on way further away to Ken Westbrook's like left of boom concept, I think. But yeah, I find hope in that because some of the folks on the stage or some of the people in the GSE have the ability to, okay, stop. We can block this DocuSign account. Or we can shut down this domain.
And that takes, thank you very much, Kit. And that takes me on to the next thing is what we do with this stuff. This is a financial sector pilot. So we're trying to add value to that. I wanted to come on to Francesca Rios, the Director of Fraud Incident Management at PayPal. Super excited to have PayPal here. You're really a technical payment gateway provider. You're really up there, global, cross-sector. You're starting your data contribution with threat URLs and IP addresses. And beyond that, what specific signals are you most interested in receiving from the GSE? And what additional signals would you find the most useful to share from PayPal out?
Sure. Thanks. And we're absolutely thrilled to be participating. When we look at the scam landscape and review customer complaints and sort of take a victim-centric approach to understanding how frauds and scams are perpetrated, we find that as a payments institution, PayPal often comes in at the last mile.
Right.
And with hindsight being 2020, we can put together signals based on that intelligence. But when we think about the fraud lifecycle, as Kit was beautifully explaining, there are hundreds of touch points and hundreds of data points that sort of precede that moment when the user pushes send and sends money to God knows who, God knows where. And so we're thrilled to be participating. But the signals that we think about really are all sorts of touch points across that life cycle that touch on our accounts. So emails, IP addresses, certainly bank account information. I think that if we could get there over the legal hurdles, that's a really rich data point because it allows you to sort of draw that complete circle with fraud infrastructure, with PayPal perhaps as sort of one node in that network.
Yeah.
So that's what we're really thrilled about.
Thank you. And we're doing another pilot with Amazon, our hosts. They've got a lot of malvertising signals and intelligence. We're delighted to be launching that pilot with them and others. They've been focusing on a metric of value per advert blocked. We all talk about the destruction and the value of destruction when people are attacked. And it's very hard to sell the concept of prevention, of value. In advertising, we've got to start talking about when we take this activity, when we share these signals, that has a value. And it has a value in less police services, less payment refunds, How can we quantify that? And is the finance sector interested in that sort of metric? What can we do to articulate that?
Resounding yes. We're absolutely interested in that sort of metric. And as somebody beautifully said earlier today, how do you convince the C-suite that these initiatives matter? Frankly, sometimes it comes down to the bottom line. There's the altruistic do the right thing piece of it, and then there's also the dollar and cents. And so putting real metrics in terms of the value add to our customers has been very important and frankly motivating. I co-lead our scam prevention program at PayPal, and when we finally moved the boulder over the hill, it was when we could put a number behind the value that we were giving back to our customers. They stay on the platform longer if they're not touched by scams. They don't churn. And so placing value behind that is really, really important. At PayPal, we also look at scam prevented numbers, so both as a payment volume metric as well as a victim count metric.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, but to set the context of that, the Global Signal Exchange was set up by an initiative at Gaza, the Gaza Summit in Lisbon 2023, to plug a gap in things that exist. We've got a lot of things that are existing. We heard from 8 different feed providers in a workshop yesterday who were working in verticals, deep in banking, deep in telcos. And the Global Anti-Scam Summit identified a need to join the dots in a very lightweight way. So I emphasize that we're in what's called an observe and pull database. So it's basically signals are sent in and others decide what to do and how to enrich and how to ingest and when to do that. And I think that's really critical. We're not in the business of notice and takedown. We're not a postal service. You don't send us stuff and we deliver it to somebody else and then they're on notice because they've received a delivery. We're not like a lawyer delivering a notice to someone. So it's a new kind of concept. And given that, it's very important that we work with people who know best. So we work with established entities who already have signal sharing or data sharing or analogous programs themselves. And given that, I'd like to introduce Gaby Devereux. Nice to see you again since last night, where we had a coffee and a chat. Director of Innovation at the wonderful Cifas. Cifas already runs the UK's largest cross-sector fraud prevention community and the National Fraud Database. Given your existing strong data sharing ecosystem, what specific new capability or value does the GSE give Cifas, and particularly this pilot, bring to Cifas and your members that's not there already?
So for those of you that don't know what Cifas does, as Lucien said, we're a data sharing organisation. We've been sharing data for 38 years. We're a membership organisation. We've got about, I would say, 97% of the financial institutions in the UK are sharing their confirmed fraud intelligence into our national fraud database. And we've helped last year we helped our members save £2.1 billion in prevented fraud losses. So our model's proven. It's worked for 38 years, but as I don't want to teach you all to suck eggs, fraudsters and scammers evolve. We need to evolve our products as well. So our partnership with the GSE is part of that evolution of moving us and our members into the scam space. So we're about to launch our new product called Scam Link, which is going to allow our 800 members to input the scam signals we're using signals, not data, to put their scam signals into Scam Link that they've collected from their customers who are victims of scams. We're then, with our partnership with the GSE, also with Meta, going to then send those signals out so that action can be taken. So this for our members, we're now giving our members the ability to actively prevent harm and protect their customers, and that's not a capability we've had before at this scale.
Thank you very much. And what are the most significant, very briefly, because I've been told there's not much time, what are the most significant legal and regulatory challenges of sharing signals across both sectors and international borders?
Yeah, so I could talk for ages about this because it's probably one of my most passionate subjects. Look, we've been sharing data legally for 38 years. We know the score. I think for me, where we need to get to now is to give your companies' lawyers and data protection regulators the confidence and the clarity to be able to share data. The Data Protection Act, as Emily said yesterday, it's not a blocker to data sharing, it's an enabler, but we need to get people to understand that and to have a collective voice on how that data can be shared, especially if you want to go cross-border. Was that quick?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. And just closing the loop, obviously, the finance pilots, everyone said we have to have the big tech in the room, and representing the big tech, I'm pleased to welcome Sofia Oliveros from Meta, Detection, Response and Intelligence Ops at Meta. Meta is an early leader in embracing the legal and regulatory challenges of cross-sector signal sharing. What was the single biggest factor that enabled Meta to overcome these hurdles? People are talking about, well, we can't do this. And there's something important about the word data versus signals. We've had branding people, PR people. It's really important that we don't talk about data because that scares everybody. Signals are not really hard evidence-based things. I'm proud to say one of my uncles in the distant wars set up Colchester Signals Intelligence Listening Posts. So there are two signals listening organisations set up in my family, I'm delighted to say. But back to Meta, how did you overcome these hurdles?
Well, thank you, Lucien, for having me here, and nice to meet all of you. I'm Sofia, and I'm part of the big team that is working on the GSE inside of Meta. I'm in the upsides, but obviously our team is pretty big and includes legal, who did a fantastic job going through the legal hurdles that it requires to sign on to the GSE. We really wanted to keep our community safe, and that's what motivated us to join the GSE. Part of it is that we realized that we cannot do it alone. Bad actors move quite fast, and we knew that we just had a piece of the puzzle, same as what you mentioned, Francesca. So that was our biggest impetus to navigate these complex legal and regulatory challenges. But one of the biggest benefits of being part of the GSE is that once we finalized all that legal paperwork, we were able to move quite fast with the rest of our partners, right? Like if we have Google onboarded, if we have Microsoft onboarded, we can start those conversations early on, and instead of having to sign on separate papers with Google or sign separate papers with Microsoft, then we can start understanding, hey, what are you interested in sharing with us? How could this benefit us? How can our data also be useful for you? And as Will mentioned this morning, one of the most successful pilots that we've had has been on email sharing. So Microsoft picked up on weird things that they were seeing on their end, and then they passed it on to us. And then we were analyzing that information and giving feedback, and vice versa. We were also picking up weird things and sharing them with Microsoft before either party saw scam happening. So I think that's the most important thing. If anyone is a GSE member, it just becomes a very easy thing to establish pilots, understand where the intelligence is coming from. I think that's one of our biggest things that we try to understand with our members. And I think at this point, we're still maturing the relationships and understanding and doing more intelligence. But I think in a year, we obviously, as Andrea mentioned before, I think we want to move faster, and that's the ultimate goal.
Thank you.
Us.
And I think I've got -1 minute already, so I'm just going to make it very brief, and I will open this sort of question out to the others for half a sentence answers. If we can help you in terms of the finance sector, help you with 1 or 2 high priority problems in the next 12 months, what would they be?
So I think for us, in terms of the next year, as I said, I don't think we're still understanding what other partners can share, and we're pretty open with working with the financial industry. I think we understand that they're a critical piece in this scam life cycle. One of the things that we do really want to understand and get to the point is understanding more about the taxonomy of scams, what is the most prevalent scams that everyone is seeing, and also the jurisdictions. As Will and Andre both pointed out, I think ultimate goal for us is also to work with law enforcement and the government and seeing which jurisdictions the scams are.
Thank you very much. I'll go to that end and end with Kit. One particular outcome in the next 12 months.
I'm glad you repeated the question because I completely forgot what the question was. I think for us, we want to see our members, we're getting the data to you and we're not charging our members. We want the feedback. We want to know what signals are useful so that we can then make sure our members are sharing the right signals that are getting the takedowns.
And we're hearing that plea from everybody in this conference is please engage. Don't just sort of receive it, feed your ML AI models and leave it. Please come back because we're providing enrichment as well. Jen.
Yeah, thanks. So probably really similar around the value, but it's very much around the feedback is super useful, but it's useful if you report a crime that you want to know that what you've reported has resulted in some action, even if it's not an investigation. So even if you have been able to help prevent somebody else becoming a victim. That is really important. And so I think that builds that community trust and confidence as well. So
thank you. I'm going to summarize that as feedback and feedback. Francesca.
Feedback and metrics. We want to reduce time to detection, reduce the size of fraud networks, and prove up the value of signal sharing and receipt. So metrics.
You want a conversation through this system, yes.
I think I just...
Yeah. And Kit, stand up. Let's see. Yeah, come on. What? Just a final word. One specific.
I won't take the final word. I'll give it to you. But feedback. I also want feedback to know. Like sometimes there's in a lot of the scam baiting community. That's what we call ourselves. We pass things on and then never know if anything's done. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I also feel like the number one email I get is not Kit, I like your video. It's Kit, help, I've been scammed. My family lost everything. So at the end of the day, for me, like if we can help people and see the numbers go down and see people
and distribute this, unlock some value in that. Yeah. I mean, do you like working for free?
Well, thankfully, there are people who click on ads when they watch my videos. Right. But no, I love this work. And
this threat intelligence has a cost, so it must. If it can help encourage others to help and create a market, surely that's
surely.
Yeah. Great.
I'll give you the last word though.
My last word is just thank you. I crowdsourced this panel because I just want to show the depth and of the work that we're doing. And I'm sorry if it's been frustrating for any of you not to be able to extemporize beyond. I just want to thank you all for participating in this today. Thank you very much.
Yes, so this final panel of our segment today is on the power of partnership, really looking at and examining the issue of cross-sector scam prevention. So I'm going to invite our panelists up in a second, but really just to talk about what we're here for. We're all here because scams move between sectors, and we've heard that throughout this session today. And the only way to win is to find a defence that operates at speed and scale between these sectors that speak different languages, different things matter to them, different data points matter to them. So so what we're doing today is bringing together leaders from global tech, retail commerce and the ad sector, government innovation and civil society to really think about this problem. So so I would like to ask our panel to come onto the stage. So please join us. We have Craig Newmark, philanthropist and founder of Craigslist, and Nicole Tisdale, senior advisor to the cybersecurity programs at the Aspen Institute, Richard Grayburn, senior program manager at Amazon Ads, Will Blay, Principal Programme Manager of the Central Fraud and Abuse Risk at External Partnerships at Microsoft, and Andre Ng, Deputy Director at GovTech Singapore. So thank you all very much for joining us. Apologies, we're a bit crowded here, and I'm going to do what Lucien did and sort of ask Andre to stand up, because I think when you speak, because you're blocked from the sightlines here. But if we think about scene setting and the societal and civil society perspectives, I'd love to start, Craig and Nicole, with you. And Craig Newmark, for those who weren't in the plenary session this morning, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Global Signal Exchange for your generous support that you announced this morning. But if we think about the international scale of scams and fraud, why is collaboration across sectors, from tech to non-profit, a moral and defensive imperative?
I'm very simple-minded in this regards. Literally speaking, I remember what I learned in Sunday school. I guess I internalized the lesson that sometimes you got to be your brother's keeper, your sister's keeper. And that's a good basis for customer service. And I've been a customer service rep and an engineer for most of my career. Speaking earlier, while on the stage, I realized that trust and safety was a big chunk of what I was doing as a customer service rep. I had already stepped down as from being CEO. Frankly, I realized that as a manager, I suck. So I decided customer service rep was a good fit for me. And so I'm just telling people that we all do owe it to each other to pitch in, much like we did in World War II or in other times, to help each other out. It is often in the financial interest of businesses to do so as well, but I'm very simple-minded in this regards, and all I understand is my lack of social skills and my fundamental messages, so I stop there.
Thank you very much, Craig. We've heard that all age groups and types of people are targeted by scams. Alice was showing some early data findings, but we know that you care deeply about the plight of elderly people and veterans. Could you just give us a couple of words on how we support all scam victims before, during and after the scam?
My great interest is in figuring out how we can work together to detect scams as they're happening. This was a source of frustration for me for over 2 decades, because sometimes there were rather obvious clues or evidence that something was happening. It happens for me personally on a daily basis. I'm approached kind of every day. And so the idea of collecting signals or evidence or clues on an ongoing basis could be really effective. The challenge is also to connect the dots to find ways of doing that. I mean, I do like the idea of scam baiting a lot, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of the work people are doing in terms of using bots driven by large language models to deepfake possible victims and waste the time of scammers, but that's a vindictive part of me which I should not think about much.
Thank you very much. Nicole Tisdale, from your perspective as Senior Advisor to the Cybersecurity Programs at the Aspen Institute, the Aspen Institute is focusing on societal health. Could you talk a little bit about the way that scams erode trust in societies and undermine societal resilience, and what role must civil society play in driving the cross-border commitment that the global signal exchange relies on?
Sure. First of all, thank you all for having me here today. I'm not on the screen, but I promise.
Sorry about that.
It's totally fine. I thought it was really intentional that you all had someone on this panel that is from a think tank, that is from civil society. So I want to make sure people know this was thoughtful from the beginning to have this perspective. Before joining Aspen Digital, I worked at the White House National Security Council, and I also spent more than a decade working in Congress. And I tell people, when you talk about scams and we talk about how it's impacting people, when you work in Congress, you are talking to these victims on a daily basis immediately. And people have a lot of thoughts and opinions about Congress. Trust me, I've heard them all. But when you call your member of Congress, you're having the worst day of your life. You're having the worst week of your life. You've lost your life savings. You are calling because no one else has showed up to help. And that's kind of your last line of resort. And so that's how I started working on this, literally picking up the phone and hearing people who have been scammed, not just out of money. This is their 40-year retirement plan. This is a month of their groceries. And so when I talk about scams and when we talk about the perspective of civil society, what it's also stealing from people is opportunity and trust. There is an implied and an enumerated protection that a democracy gives its people. And when you have these instances happen, and even if it's the first time and your government doesn't have the tools to fight back, it really does start to chip away at the trust people have in not just their banking institution or the retailer that they think that the scam originated from, but also in their government. And so what I think the role that we have at Aspen Digital is to put these people in the room to not only just hear the voices of the victims, but also what are the barriers that the policymakers and the lawmakers are running into. Put the retailers, put the companies in the same space so that we can all be clear about our shared mission, which is to stop these scams, but also what tools we have and what barriers we have. And for us, that trust and also having a safe space. The private sector can come, companies can come, and you can be at Aspen Digital. And Gaby alluded to this earlier. There is a lot of fear of what can we share, what can we do, what will we get in trouble about, and also the bureaucracy of the United States government is quite dense when it comes to scams. You don't always, especially our global partners, you don't even know who to call sometimes when you have a policy issue. And so that's our role, to put those people in the rooms, understanding, trying to get across the bureaucratic barriers and issues and scams. It's not the fun stuff. It's not the sexy stuff, but it is the things that need to happen in order for us to make a difference.
And thank you. And just a quick follow-up on that, because you've talked about the important role of think tanks and shaping policy, and also the role of government in fulfilling the promise in a democracy to protect people from harm and crime. If you could change one piece of policy to make cross-sector data sharing easier, what would it be?
Yes. It's funny, Gaby said earlier, the lawyers aren't always clear about what they can share. And we see that happen time and time again. So when you said that, I was like, true. So my one thing, I think we have to start talking about the liability protections and the incentives. And I am a lawyer, but I'm a fun lawyer, I promise. What I say is we need to start thinking about safe harbor provisions, and we need global safe harbor provisions, especially when companies are trying to do the right thing, when law enforcement is trying to do the right thing. I work on cybersecurity general and protections of infrastructure, and in the United States, we passed our first major piece of cyber incident reporting when I was working at the National Security Council, and we don't penalize people for the attack. We don't penalize people for not reporting yet. And what I tell people is when you give people safe harbors, all these people that say, well, then people, like, if you do bad, then we should punish you. That's not where we are now. We are in a place where we have to start sharing information, and we have to take the barriers out of sharing information. If we want to come back 5 years after we've been sharing under a safe harbor and we want to do penalties, then we can. But right now it's about sharing information, and then we can build on what needs to come next. So that's my one thing.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for, really setting the scene about the societal impact of scams and fraud, and giving that sort of moral imperative for cross-sector sharing. I'd like to turn now to, from policy to action and the signal sharing in action. I'd like to start with Richard Grayburn, who's the Senior Program Manager at Amazon Ads, and also a leading player in our malvertising pilot in the Global Signal Exchange. So other members of the malvertising pilot include the UK Advertising Association and other big tech platforms. That doesn't sound very cross-sector to me. So in an ideal world, which other stakeholders would benefit from both the sharing and receiving of malvertising signals?
For those of you who don't know, malvertising just means scam ads. In words are very important for every industry. So my job's really simple. If an Amazon customer sees an advert that's a scam, I've failed. My team's failed. We block everything that we even suspect. But what that means is we're playing whack-a-mole the whole time. There is a malvertising company that's, let's say, within 100 miles of where we're sitting today. Every Friday, they fire up 1 million ads on Amazon or through one of our Amazon feeds. They're doing the same on Google, Meta, they're doing the same in Walmart. This is every week. We find them, we block them, and the next week they come up. So I have two problems with that. One, it costs us money. Two, my engineers kill me because they're getting call-outs at 2 o'clock in the morning because this thing is tripping all the alarms. So we can do it. We can stop these getting through. But the very fact that they're doing 1 million every week means that something must be working. and they're spending a lot of money. They've got really good deep fake of Oprah Winfrey saying, buy this product. It's very high quality. So they're making money somewhere. What we need to do is start going after them. We've Google Street Viewed them. We know where they are. I mean, we've seen them. So we need to be able to find the other partners within GSE to say, right, how do we put a case together? How do we work with people? How do we find the infrastructure they're running on? How do we find the domain servers they're using? How do we find the banks they're using? So that we can actually start putting all this information together and we can take them out of the system. And we also need to do the same with the victims, people I would call the victims. There's a publisher, actually also in Virginia, who, very, very good online newspaper, award-winning, but no idea of security. So they were identified by one of our partners, and the Attorney General in Virginia worked with them, made them secure. Virginia's fraud levels dropped. So the whole state fraud level dropped by, I think it was 1% or something, or a fraction of a percent, but a measurable amount, because we'd found them and we'd hardened them. So we need all the other people to get involved.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's a really hopeful story, because often, you know, one gets caught up in your world and signal sharing or whatever you're doing becomes an objective in itself. But actually that final remark about when this happened, the level of crime actually fell is really inspirational and keeps us on track. So I just wanted to pick up and pose to you something that Nicole mentioned, which is about the incentives for sharing versus the incentives for keeping things to yourself. I mean, I think it is, and other speakers in other panels have mentioned this, it's not easy to cross that line mentally and go, right, we're going for it, we're going to share. Could you tell us why it's the right thing to share, you know, whether in the context of the malvertising pilot? Why does it make sense?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not.
No, you're not.
You'd kill me. I think the best way to do this is an example. So in Germany about 2 years ago, there was a malvertising attack that went across the whole of Germany. It took, in 24 hours, it took a minimum, a lowball estimate of 7 million euros in fraud out of Germany. That attack was identified by several companies about 3 or 4 hours into that 24 hours, but they had no way of telling anyone. So they knew about it, they were protecting their customers, but their neighbours didn't know, and they couldn't tell them. If GSE or a similar thing had been around, there's the potential that about, let's say, 6 hours in, we'd have all known about it, we'd have all immunised each other. And that 7 million suddenly becomes 500,000. And that's got two huge benefits. One, obviously, people aren't getting scammed. But two, the scammers are now losing money. Their return on investment doesn't work because they've got to get this thing. It costs them a lot of money to set this stuff up. They've got to get 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is. And we've now taken that out of them. So that means next time they've got to pay more to protect it. They've got to pay more. They've got to become more complicated. The call centres that they're paying don't get the income they got. So we start attacking their income as well as protecting customers. So that's why we've got to share.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Richard. And I'd like to move on now to Will Blay, Principal Programme Manager at the Central Fraud and Abuse Risk at Microsoft and also external partners. Now, I don't often hear people being quoted on a panel when they haven't been speaking yet, but several of the speakers have already referred to remarks that you've made at this conference, Will. Could you just reflect on what the GSE has enabled Microsoft to do that it hasn't done before, and also what the sectors are in your mind that are vital to participate to you know, really achieve true cross-sector sharing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing it's done is it's given us a common technical taxonomy across the company. We've always shared data externally with partners, with government, with law enforcement, but it's extremely fragmented. And candidly, even though we're Microsoft, and yes, there's a lot of engineers, this, that, and the other, we do have limitations with resourcing and things like that. We can't just go out and build a connection to everybody. So I think the biggest thing we've seen is that whether it's connections, working with the Google and the Meta team, working with government like GovTech and whatnot, and others, and ongoing conversations we're being able to kind of direct folks towards the GSE, and not to say if they can't use the GSE, we're not going to work with them, right? But it's a first nice pass of saying if we can get as much signal and kind of directing the masses to the GSE, for us then we can streamline all that data through one platform, pull it in, and then disperse it out across the company internally for various different use cases. So. And again, for a company of our size, having that ability to move quickly and again centralize that data, it's a really key element because otherwise things are scattered, things are disparate. There's different legal and privacy requirements and things like that as you go across the company. And next thing you know, an engagement now that takes us a matter of hours to do could take weeks, if not months. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. And from let's just go back to what the sectors are. We're thinking about cross-sector sharing. So, what, in your mind, what does that mean? What is effective? What are the sectors that should be in the GSE and should be cooperating together to fight scams and fraud, in your view?
Well, certainly, obviously, tech relevant for us, but government, law enforcement. I think we spoke about earlier some of the work we're doing with Google regarding data that we've shared via the GSE, and now we're going to take a supplemental criminal referral in combination with Google around that. So it's getting as many government and law enforcement partners. But going back to the private side, it's great to see finance because certainly we have very large payment volumes inside of Microsoft, and that'll be very valuable for us to collaborate more with the finance sector, understand what they're seeing. I think another one that's interesting too is telco. There is a lot of value with that and signals that they could share. I think for us internally, like a solution like Microsoft Teams, or even Skype, if anyone still uses Skype.
I do.
Yeah. There is a lot of history of fraud and scams originating from platforms like Skype. So as we, kind of get off that platform and things are shifting more towards Teams and whatnot, though still collaborating with telcos would be very valuable for us. So all that to be said, it's kind of cliche, but anybody who wants to share data, we want to share data with you. We want to get data. I think whoever wants to is great, but that would be kind of my initial thought on some of the sectors.
Thank you very much. So let me bring in Andre Ng now, Deputy Director at GovTech Singapore. So Andre, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having me.
GovTech Singapore was the first government to join the GSE. Tell us why you decided to join and what the impact the GSE is having on your fight against scams and fraud in Singapore.
Right. So,
would you like to stand up?
Oh,
I don't know
yes.
if people can see you.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So for us, the promise of cross-sector multilateral sharing was too good of a compelling story to ignore. Hence, we quickly onboarded because we also recognize that the Singapore government cannot fight scams and fraud alone. We need the tech partners to help us not just disrupt, but also feed information on telling us how to prevent them from reoccurring again. And I will use a recent example that we have with Meta. So what happened was that we shared really non-sensitive signals like URLs with Meta. And what happens, and these signals are actually labeled by the Singapore Police Force. So these are known scammy URLs. They are like 100% confidence in our eyes. So when we were able to send these signals to Meta was able to fan out internally within their platforms or ecosystem and then take down about 17,000 assets or disable them. So that was like one of the first few examples that concrete examples where we saw cross-sector sharing, things that would not have happened if we hadn't shared that signal. And maybe just a little bit of bonus, not just beyond sharing signal. What the GSE has allowed us to do is to come together, we are as common-minded engineers, to exchange notes. So we've recently had a data, not data exchange, but like more of like knowledge exchange between Richard's team and our team on certain machine learning challenges that we have been facing. So Richard's team had some challenge in, I think it was a URL and metadata kind of
yeah, you'd solved
challenge.
it.
No, not really.
We were
but like,
6 months in and we still hadn't solved
no,
it.
no. So Richard's team has solved like a content analysis problem that we were trying to resolve, and because of that collaboration and that kind of information sharing or knowledge sharing, we were able to reduce the development cycles on both ends. So it's sort of a mutually beneficial kind of relationship that we're looking forward to.
That's great. And before you sit down,
yes,
just as a final thing, if there was a government official sitting in the audience, government official from another country who might be thinking, oh, maybe I should get into this, what advice would you give them about, either the benefits or just where to start? Very practical, where to start?
Right. I think, to sum up, I think really you need to think big, start small, and fail fast. I'll break it down. So I think big. So I think one of the things that we did in a way correctly or by chance was to immediately work with large tech companies, because they were able to give you the scale that you need. So one thing I've learned in doing this is that only after we implemented scaled solutions like what Mark Chen has mentioned earlier this morning, were we able to make an impact on national statistics. So you really need the scale when it comes to making an impact. And these tech companies will be able to help you with that. The thing about starting small is that the Singapore government did not arrive at this decision to send this specific signal to this specific company or this bunch of companies by intelligent design. We arrived here after many trial and errors. So I would advise to start small and start iterating. And then also this relates to fail fast, because chances are with experiments, you will definitely face challenges and failures. So that's part of the cycle. If anything, this is to give you some assurance, you will fail. And I think the key thing is to keep a positive view on this and carry on experimenting and iterating, and until you get the right answer. So have very robust metrics on what you want to look at, and hold the team accountable to that. And if it doesn't work out, move on. So eventually you'll reach there. It's how fast you iterate that matters.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So we're nearly out of time, and I want to thank the panelists and the audience. But just before we finish, maybe we could just ask each of the panelists to say in 30 seconds, what success looks like. We're all here because we want to actually reduce scams and fraud and protect people. So I did it earlier with Andre in the first chat. Complete the sentence. I'll know that we're winning when something happens. Craig.
I think I know when we're winning, when everyone expects that the norm is that companies look out for our safety online and individual citizens look out for our mutual safety online.
Nicole.
I've worked in counterterrorism, and I've worked in cybersecurity and espionage policy, so I'm always very realistic about my expectations. When people say, we don't want any cyber attacks, I'm like, I don't know that that's realistic, that there will never be cyber attacks. But I would like, when people are calling their policymakers, when they're calling their government after a natural disaster, that they're calling to get help after a natural disaster, not because they were scammed after a natural disaster. There are things in our society that are going to continue to happen to people. There will always be marginalized groups. I would like our focus to be on helping people who need food assistance, not that they were scammed out of their food assistance.
Thank you. Richard.
For me, it's we stop playing whack-a-mole. So we're not focusing on blocking anymore. We're focusing on stopping the malvertisers actually setting up the adverts and releasing them. If we can get to that stage, we're actually doing something. And I agree, we'll never stop them. But if we're focusing on that, we're focusing on the cure, not the prevention.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, I would say the environment and ecosystem as a whole is more conducive to doing these sorts of exercises quickly and efficiently. I know we've had our own internal battles with legal, privacy, compliance. I know everybody does. I know the governments do. So I think in the future we can get to a state where when you're sharing data with one another for the purposes or under the umbrella of it's preventing fraud, scams, abuse, that maybe some of the guardrails come down a little bit from a regulatory framework perspective. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. So because I think the sentiment's there. Everyone you speak to here wants to share data, but if there's going to be a blocker, it's usually something in that ballpark that will prohibit people.
Wonderful. Thank you. Andre, take us home.
All right. And I know we are winning when we come back here 1 year from now with all the stories, wonderful stories, success stories of cross-sector sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to keep you from the lunch break because that would be foolish. I just want to thank all of our panelists and speakers, Andre, Alice, the panel on the finance sector, the panel on cross-sector data sharing. You've been wonderfully generous with sharing your insights and knowledge with us all. We have a stand. Please come and find us at the stand if you'd like to talk more. There's so much more to talk about. Thank you for attending today and for your interest in global signal sharing to drive down scams and fraud. Thank you very much.